get started and do the questions, have you play some spins. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you play.
Yeah, I've been involved in poker for a long time now. I started out as like probably everyone as a casual player. I played in university, just home games with my friends, and really enjoyed it and found I wanted to get better and better. But then, unfortunately, I graduated university, and all my friends went off to different places. So I started playing online because I missed playing poker with my buddies. So I started playing online, and I got more into it, and eventually found my sort of footing in heads up sit and goes. And from that point on, I ended up leaving a graduate program to pursue poker professionally. I was impacted by Black Friday because I was an American player, and so decided to sort of leave everything behind, including the U.S., and moved abroad to pursue professional poker, and worked my way up in heads up sit and goes, and generally started doing more coaching and software along the way. I have a background in math and physics, and I ended up actually, while being a professional poker player, I did a master's in mathematics. So I'm very much drawn to sort of the theory side and sort of the understanding behind the game, and I really love explaining it to other people. So I find I spend a similar amount of time, if not more, coaching and studying than playing. But I still love to play. I absolutely love poker. So I was playing heads up sit and goes for a really long time, and then spins came around, and I wanted to give them a try, and was pretty instantly hooked, and thought this game's really, really good and fun and addicting and exciting, etc. So I ended up moving most of my work towards spins. Although the heads up sit and go part is so big in spins, about 2/3 of your EV in a spin is the heads up part. So, having a really solid heads up background made spins, way easier.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of heads up hyper players in particular who I know went to spins and have been very successful as a group.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead, and you had a really nice idea that I liked a lot of sort of climbing up through the ranks and playing some spins as we got through the questions in the thread.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. I'll load up a $1 spin and go then.
Okay, sweet. Let's do it.
Get started. All right. Should I turn the noise off?
Yeah, that would be great. And everyone in the chat, you guys should be able to have a nice clear view of Adam's table. So let me know if there are any problems with that, but everything should be looking pretty good now.
All right, so we got ace 10 off. This is a very clear 3-bet shove. And
So in this spot, we don't miss out on some value by not taking a line that might keep his range a little bit wider.
no, because it's offsuit, it still benefits a lot from protection. So all the hands you fold out, you're getting some value from, in a sense, because you don't have to play against them post. And you get called by a lot of hands that you dominate and have a lot of value versus, and obviously getting called for a larger amount gives you more money. So if ace 10 off, it's a pretty standard shove.
Okay.
It's not the end of the world to mix in not on 3-betting in some situations if you expect your opponent to 4-bet particularly light, but it's pretty rare.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to start off by getting to some of these questions because people have been asking all week, and I've got a lot I want to ask you, but I got to be fair and I got to get to some of the initial questions. And we start off with Barry Carter, who, before we get to his question, is your screen name coffeeyay? Is that because of a love of coffee, or does it play at something else?
Yeah, essentially. I made it in university. So one of my biggest criteria was I wanted a unique name that wouldn't have any numbers. And already back then, it was hard to get a name. So I just kept thinking of different ones. And I like coffee, and I'm a pretty upbeat guy. So my friends would always joke about me, like saying yay at stuff. So I was like, oh, coffee, yay.
Yay!
Yeah.
I like that. There's one of the characters in this show, Crank Yankers. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It was a prank call show who was always yelling "Yay!" So
Yep.
it amused me. But let's get to Barry Carter's question, which is, what is your favorite type of coffee, and how much do you drink?
My favorite kind's espresso. I don't drink all that much coffee nowadays. Kind of moved into more drinking green tea, but I don't know. I probably have a cup once a week, and I like having a good espresso after dinner occasionally.
Nice, nice. Here we've got enough showdown value with King High, right? That's kind of why we're giving up.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not so easy to get folds on that kind of texture. And small blind is going to actually flat a lot of ace high, so he's going to actually have a lot of ace x.
Right,
Um,
right.
and given that the turn is a low card, it's not easy to get folds. But yeah, I'll sometimes beat a random king 10 high, queen jack high that floats, or plausibly a draw.
Right, right. King 10 suited on the button.
Pretty standard.
Is this pretty clear? I
There's
assume.
room to see about this. It's really, actually really close probably on this texture, whether we'd see better or not. Now it's a very clear fold.
Right, right. Okay, yeah.
But
Yeah, I was going to say, I probably wouldn't see bet there against two, so I was curious if you would. And
yeah, we're not too worried about the two because the small blind isn't going to have a lot of eights and sixes. They're mostly going to have high cards. So I'm not as worried, although this is lower stakes, so the small blind might be calling a little bit too light.
now the
But
fact that you're defending this hand, do you have any folding range in big blind facing small blind min raise?
yeah, I fold probably about bottom 10 to 20% depending on stack depth.
Okay.
But this hand's it still has some connectivity and is rather live, so we can defend it. And we can defend the
Ooh.
flop because we have a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw, and we'll have a lot of bluff opportunities on the turn. Now I'm kind of siding. I think I probably should just raise for value. There's room to call, but there are a good amount of bad rivers, and there's a good amount of room where our opponent won't want to barrel a lot of bluffs since he's a lower stakes player. So I think I'm just going to raise here. You could jam too, but there's a little bit more room where if he has a flush draw, I can get a little more value raising down all in. Okay. Kind of cooler for him.
Sweet.
I'm
Yeah, that's the important thing in your spin results, right? How you run in the $1 games.
yeah.
All right. Nice ISO there. Next question also comes from Barry Carter. He wants to know, do you agree with this crude description of spin and go that they're basically a heads-up S&G where you can also get lucky and play for a small fortune?
I mean, they have a three-handed element to them too, so that makes it different from a heads-up sit and go. Yeah, I mean the element of getting lucky and play for a small fortune isn't something that attracts me all that much. I mean, it can be fun, but obviously it's just another level of variance. But yeah, so I don't think too much about winning $1 million or anything like that. I just think about making the best decisions in every game and trying to make as much money per game as I can. But it's kind of cool in the back of my mind. Any day I could win $1 million. Not gonna lie, it's a pretty cool element to it.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I mean, the real question is what attracts the recreational players, right? If
Yeah.
it didn't have that element, then there's a good chance that recreational players would not have largely moved to spins. And then, you'd have more people playing heads-up S&G, 9-man S&G, and less of that influx into spin and go.
Yeah, it's plausible. I mean, it's also a pretty fun format with kind of a good mixture of, some multi-way, but a good amount of heads up. Heads up sit and goes are really popular amongst recreational players, back when they were a newer format. So it's hard to separate that kind of stuff. Like, how much is it? It's a fun, exciting, fast format. It's new, etc. And how much is it the gimmick from the spin element? It's probably a little bit of both.
Right, right, that makes sense. I'll continue with the thread questions in a second, but I notice Primrose writing in chat, and she wants to know that spins are very swingy. What bankroll management guidelines would you suggest?
Yeah, it varies a ton with how good you think you are or what your sort of expected win rate is, which is obviously tough to estimate without a lot of sample. But if you're willing to move down, you can be more aggressive. I generally recommend people, there's there are some tools that you can use to kind of model your chances of going broke. You can try to use that. But something you should definitely have at least 50 big blinds. I mean, it's going on a 50 buy and downswing is pretty common. So, you should plan on, at least 50. But if you're willing to move down, I mean, you can always move down to a stake where you have 50. So if you're looking to stay at the same stake for a long time, you probably need something around 200 buy-ins. So again, I mean, it varies a lot with, how much you're planning on withdrawing, how much you want to move up, move down, things like that. It's really hard to give, a really general answer.
Okay, yeah, for sure. It's going to depend a lot on how big your edge is. And the point you bring up is actually a really good one that I think some people kind of ignore at times, which is that if you're willing to move down, then that gives you a lot more flexibility. So that applies, to any format, and that's a very good thing to keep in mind. So
Yeah.
I like that.
You have to be pretty honest with yourself, though. I mean, moving down can be really hard. So if you, plan to move down, but realistically, you're probably not going to move down, then, maybe you should use more conservative bankroll management. I know when I was starting out in online games, I definitely found moving down to be really hard and played longer than I should at, stakes that I had moved up to and was stubborn and didn't want to move back down. So it's something to try to be really careful with and try to be honest with yourself.
Right. With the pocket eights there, are you ever raising?
Not this shallow, no. We're less than 10 VBs, so it's I'm lumping it basically 100% of the time.
But
Like I'm almost never shoving it, and yeah, basically always lumping it.
But you do have a raising range.
Less than 10 VBs, no. I mean, I have an open shove range.
Right,
But
okay.
not a raising range.
Okay.
But yeah, the
And
open shove.
the open shove range is going to be like low pocket pairs, low offsuit aces kind of thing?
Yeah, some kings, depending on stack depth, semi bluffs. Yeah. Mostly thin value at these stakes because I can get away with limping a lot of semi bluffs, but depending on how aggressive my opponent is, maybe more semi bluff suited connectors. And yeah, depending again how aggressive, kind of changes how many traps I'm including. But a hand like pocket eights, I'm basically always trapping because it's so good post flop, especially shallow when people are ISOing a lot of high cards. You're not even worried about too many bad textures for you. Because your opponent will be hitting so many under pairs to your 8 so often that it's worth just playing post. And when they shove or ISO non all in, you're more often inducing bluffs.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So that's one win. You just need to win the next 6, and then you pull off the clean sweep.
Yeah, can run the math on that one happening. It's not too likely.
Not too likely, but you know what? And then if that happens, you'll have to play the $10 one and win the package to Macau.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then, yeah, we can talk next time for Macau.
Boombay, yeah, it's loaded whenever you want, no rush. And Boombay wants to know, there is a hand where in 7-10 deuce you c-bet pocket 9s and then barreled the ace turn, and he wants to know the thought process behind that barrel.
I didn't see that. I checked it back.
Oh, okay.
It was 10-6 deuce. I checked back the flop to induce. I think betting would also be okay, but the 10 hits some of his range. We're shallow and face a good amount of check raises, and the 10 is still in their range. Unlike on the king 7 deuce where I had pocket 8s, I bet it because there's very few kings. So I checked it back, and then once he checked to me on the ace, I'm betting for value from 6s and 2s. I don't think he'll have all that many 10s because he didn't lead the turn. So at that point, I'm just trying to get value from the weak pairs.
Yeah. What are the green? Are these guys regs, recreational players?
I think recreationals.
Okay.
I'm surprised I have them noted.
Yeah, 3s. But
Did I note them at the beginning of the game? I might have done that subconsciously, just like automatically.
I didn't think you did.
Yeah, I must have already had them noted.
Yeah, that's
they
funny.
Must have hundreds. Where I noted them last time I was calibrating my HUD or something.
So what do you think about raising pre-flop there against rec player?
I think this hand raises rather poorly. It doesn't really do very well when called. Like, you're going to get called by a lot of hands that dominate you, play well versus you. And at the same time, the hands we fold are kind of the hands that we play pretty well versus post-flop. So it's a hand I'm almost never raising. And if you get limp shoved, it's also really bad because you're folding out two suited high cards. So they're actually folding out a good amount of equity share. So I don't think I would ever raise that hand. Or I don't remember the last time I've raised it.
Okay.
It's just a hand I'm basically always checking back.
What? By the way, I have a question about the button small blind markers you have. What program is this? Is that Stars Helper?
Yeah, it's Stars Helper.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have it set up super well. I mostly use it for effective stacks, just to have a live effective stack number. And I have a couple other, it gives me pot odds and a couple other things I occasionally use. But
Could you move, this is a request from Seesaw McFish, the player who's currently small blind is blocking one of his cards, he wants to know if you can move it slightly.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Perfect.
I can just get rid of it. Oh, no, it won't let me get rid of it. Up here?
Sure, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. For those of you still asking questions in the Twitch chat, I will try to get back to that soon, but we're going to go to the next one from the thread. It's kind of a value protection bet with
Just
the ace
value.
king.
We don't really expect him to check to us with all that many straights or two pair.
Right,
so when he check, he's weighted towards single pair and draws, flush draws, and a lot of single pair. And okay, I have the nuts.
You do
pretty
have
sure
the nuts.
I do have the nuts.
And we're slow rolling him. Nice. If he had checked you, would you have jam there, or do you bet smaller?
Yeah, I think I'd probably just jam.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
I don't know. It's a little close there. If there had been, the problem there is that there wasn't any other real low straight possibility. Like he couldn't have a lower straight. So he'd basically be calling to chop or not. So maybe it would make sense to bet smaller. Usually it'd be a jam if on a 5-card straight board, just because with the nut straight, just because they could have another straight or something, or especially on a 4-card straight board. But their ace isn't super likely in his range either. Well, and we chop with it. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it makes some sense to have pot, but probably jamming.
Yeah, I agree with jam there. I like that.
This is going to be one of our good kickers, so it's in our check raise range. And that's not like our favorite card, but it's not bad. And there's still enough value from other hands. So enough value from worse 10s and 5s. It's hard for him to fold a 5 now because the board's paired. And there's room to check call here. I think I got to check call. Jamming's also fine, but
target
when
the
I check
busted draws.
Yeah, there's still a good amount of flush draws, and I think a lot of 10s will jam anyways. So he did have a 10, and he didn't jam it. So, but yeah, I think there were enough busted draws where it could be okay. It's really close there.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have a question in the thread from Xerxes, who wants to know if people can learn spin strategy by themselves, and if so, what resources you would recommend.
Sure. You can learn any game by yourself. The problem is that it generally takes a lot longer than getting help by joining a staking program like SpinLegends or getting a coach. But as far as resources, there's a lot of free videos around. PokerStrategy.com has a lot of material. The website I've worked with for a long time, HRSNG.com, has a lot of free material and paid material. I have a video pack there. So there is a lot of material if you look around. And the forums, 2+2 is still a pretty active forum where you can post hands, ask questions. Poker Strategy has a forum where you can post hands, ask questions. So, there's a lot of resources for people who want to learn on their own. And, certainly I have a lot of respect for people who want to learn on their own. I mostly learned on my own, but it's not easy. This is kind of gross. Whatever. There's not a lot of implied odds because they're so shallow.
Yeah, I thought we had to fold there. And I agree with what you're saying in answer to that question. You're right. I mean, you can't learn anything by yourself, but a lot of the time it's the hard way. And we will definitely talk about that more. Actually, we have a question a little bit later that asks about Spin Legends and the resources available in Spin Legends. So we'll get to that in just a bit. But for sure, it's doable, but just a little bit harder.
Hmm. I really don't think that he can bluff here. There's so few bluffs possible. Because he min bet the flop. Like, he min raise pre, which is already really strong, or she. And then min bet the flop and is betting so small here. I'm just going to hero fold. I mean, we're so shallow, it's not going to be a big mistake to still continue. But I think that's a really good place to find a hero fold because their range seems so unlikely to have worse hands than mine. And I mean, they're so strong between a min raise pre so shallow, betting the flop so small, which kind of sells the story of pocket a set type hand, and then betting the turn so small when they could have just jammed. It's pretty unlikely to be a draw if they could have just jammed.
Right, right. Question from my friend Beetle CZ. He wants to know. I didn't even notice this. Did you limp ace-8 offsuit at 7 blinds?
Um, did I? I thought it was deeper. I should be jamming that.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah, it's very rarely a limp there. I might not have been paying enough attention.
Right.
Uh,
Okay, no problem.
I feel like this
Just
player's limping a pretty weak range. Oh, this board's bad. I don't think we have any folds. Oh well.
um,
Yeah.
what happens? I didn't totally see the stacks, but if he limp shoves pre, we have to call that off, right? Or priced in.
No, no, no. It's such a strong range that no, we're not priced in. It's.
See,
I mean,
I would have said that we
I,
didn't have room to raise small at that short a stack depth, but obviously that's
it's fine.
not part of your approach. You
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest sizing I'd use. Min raising would also be good there, like raising to 90. But even raising 100, I mean you're gonna need like 35% odds. Oh, I should have bet there. Oh well. You're gonna need like 35% odds, and I can't raise here. Oh well. I guess I could raise, but there's really not a lot of combos of jacks that do this. So. Oh,
wow,
okay.
lost the
Got
min.
it. Um, I should bet the turn. I guess I would have lost even more. But what was I
Well,
saying? Yeah, I mean, there's having 35% equities, you're gonna not have it with something like 6-4 off
so
versus a limp shove range.
what is the purpose though of the raise? Are we trying to show an immediate profit pre-flop or just
Yep.
as part of a post-flop line?
Yeah, I mean, sure we can bluff post too, but I do expect a lot of folds. People when they limp shallow tend to be rather polarized between really weak hands and really strong hands. There's not all that many hands in the middle that can flat, so you get a pretty fair amount of folds. We're raising so small, you don't really need all that many folds to begin with. And then if they do flat, we can still bluff post. So there's still room to do that. Uh, this player's been leading this flop a lot. But, I guess we call one more, although we're not too happy at this point. Oh, well, 13% of the time. I think we occasionally chop here fours. There are
Well,
some mistakes. I'm not gonna fold.
yeah, I can't imagine ever folding there. I mean, we're just getting too good odds, and
Don't expect to be good very often, but
yeah, I
hopefully
think you've got to call
13%.
there.
Hopefully 13% of the time.
All right, well, let's move on to questions from Euthanasia. He has a number of questions, so let's just start off and see where we get with these. His first question, let me see if I can condense this a little bit. If a player has a certain chip EV per tournament in heads-up hypers, do you expect that person would have the same chip EV and spins for the heads-up portion?
Um, I mean, not exactly because the stacks are different, right? Like you're playing with larger stacks, so you probably would make more chips, but then like the blinds are different. Like it's not going to translate exactly, but like more or less. I mean, the game's the same. There's some small differences in how the population plays, but they're not all that large. So I mean, yeah, if you're a good winner at hypers, you're going to be a good winner at the heads up portion of spins. It's the same game, but yeah, I mean, it's not going to translate exactly in terms of chip EV. Just because you'll have deeper stacks. Oh god. You'll have deeper stacks and different like blind levels and stuff.
Right, right. We're gonna need a miracle run out to get our 7 for 7.
Yeah, looks like not happening.
All right.
We'll move up to where people respect our raises.
Awesome. The next question from Euthanasia is actually a good one. He wants to know what your thoughts are on multi-tabling.
Um, I think people tend to play too many tables on average. I think a lot of players play too many tables and suffer as a result. I think one of the especially beginning players, low stakes players, I strongly recommend playing fewer tables. One tabling hypers, maybe two tabling, one or two tabling spins is going to be your best bet. And the reason is for a lot of there's a number of good reasons. One is you'll learn more. You should be thinking of your low stakes games as an investment in your future skills. And when you're playing fewer tables, you're able to focus more and learn from what's going on. You're able to pay attention to what people are doing to learn their tendencies, and pay attention to what you're doing so you can learn from your mistakes and learn your weaknesses and your strengths. So in some sense, even though you're playing, even if your hourly is lower, which it probably isn't, you're going to be learning more per hour. And so your future expectation value is higher. Another major one is that you're going to have a higher ROI, which means you're less likely to be losing, break even. You're also going to go through fewer swings, fewer downswings, not as bad downswings. The higher your ROI, the lower your variance, and the more cushion you have to sort of run bad in some sense. And then lastly, I think that playing fewer tables can often be more fun and relaxing. When you're playing a lot of tables, it can be really stressful, really tiring. I see this in my own play. I think it's a lot more fun and enjoyable to play fewer tables. So I think people should be measuring their volume in terms of hours played and studied, not in terms of the number of games. Quality volume is playing hours. You're going to win and you're going to do well when you put in the hours, not pump some arbitrary number of games.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's easy too because you can focus on stuff like the rake back you get, from playing, which it's fixed. You know how much that's going to be, and it's easy to think of that as kind of like your salary, and that's a very good point. I've definitely done that at plenty of times in my career, played more tables than I could really handle, given the difficulty of those or for my concentration. So, very good
Yeah,
point.
I mean, rake back is, you're getting the rake back that you put in. So, I mean, it's not really any different from, profits or anything else. It's all part of the same thing. And honestly, the differences between bronze level and silver, that's another really common thing I find is people, put in too many games at the end of the month trying to reach gold when, it can mean a difference in rake back of $20 on the next month. And they burn through $100 of EV playing way too many tables or at too high stakes. And then end up getting their gold level, which, counts for $20 next month. So
Right,
something.
right. Definitely a common thing among Stars players.
We,
Oh, nice. Hey, when in the pre-flop in that hand, he opened 4x. I assume that's about the largest you would flat a raise pre there?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we can flat. I mean, I would probably have a flatting range versus almost every sizing, because there's going to be some hands that'll still flat better than jamming. Once you think your opponent's never folding, there can still be value to flatting hands that can sometimes fold the flop. But Yeah, I mean, versus a 4x, I mean, if it was a 5x, I might fold 9-7 suited. And like 9-7 suited is one of the worst hands. I would probably call a 4x there. But since it's suited and connected, it's good enough.
Right. Okay, sweet. To people asking questions in the chat, once again, I do want to get to all of your questions, but I have to go through the thread ones first, since those people took the time in advance to ask. So do me a favor, save your questions, and then we'll probably have some time at the end, and we can get back and do as many as we can from the chat. So let's continue with Euthanasia. He wants to know if you could talk a little bit about sizings and, in general, how you formulate sort of, sizings for C betting, for value betting, and situations like that.
Um, there's a lot of closeness with sizes in general. Like if you start thinking about it in terms of like GTO or balance play, a variety of sizes can work basically equally well. So instead, I generally try to think about like what I'm trying to accomplish with my bets. And I'm very often sizing my bluffs differently for my value bets, for instance. Like on boards where I don't think my opponent's going to change their defending strategy too much with my sizing, I'll use a small size with my bluffs and a big size with my value. And generally the idea of value betting is you want to bet as big as you can get while still getting them to call the hands they're interested in calling you. When you're bluffing, it's the opposite. You want to bet as small as you can get away with while still getting them to fold, the hands you're interested in them folding. So, I mean, it's tough. Like every spot has, different sizes that work well. But I think when you really try to focus in on ranges and think about like, what's their calling range, what's their folding range, and how is that going to change with my sizing, and maybe what's their raising range, then you can generally do pretty well. Try to decide if I want to bluff here. I guess it's good enough. So I'm trying to fold out pairs here, so I'm going to bet reasonably large. I could maybe even
kind of worried when you use all of your time bank besides 1 second and then
Yeah.
bet. I think I'd fold if I were him. I don't know what he has, but
Yeah, I think there's enough room where he has king high. Like you check back on ace 3-4. A lot of people check back mostly weak showdown. They're going to bluff a lot on that texture. So they mostly check back weak showdown. They're going to value bet a lot too. Like if they have an ace, it's a wet enough border, they're not going to slow play it much. So I think it's pretty weighted towards 3s and 4s. And with the 2-8s and the flush draw coming out, I think I have enough room where I can almost definitely fold out king high. And I think I fold out a good amount of 3s and 4s with a big enough sizing. But that's like one place where sizing actually makes a really big difference. Because if I bet small, I think I'm just never getting a fold from a 3 or 4. And sometimes getting heroed by king X. Whereas when you bet on the larger side, you can get more 3s and 4s to fold, which is a really big part of their range. And so it does change how much they fold. Again, I think maybe I could have even bet bigger there. I don't even hate betting something like 80 or even 100. But I think 70 is probably sort of the smallest big size.
Right.
The smallest size still looks kind of big.
It's funny with his screen name too.
Yeah, let's bet more.
All right, now we're going to move on to a couple of really long technical questions people have that I'm going to condense. I'm going to give you my Colin Moshman version of these questions, and we'll see where we get to. If people want us to, we can elaborate more. The first one is from my friend Tony PMM. Tony notes that GTO tools do not do calculations for all possible flops, but a small subset of flops, and he wants to know how many flops you think should be included into analysis to have a good balance of accuracy and a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, so just to kind of expand a little bit. So what he's talking about is there's a lot of GTO tools now that can solve for pre-flop play. But in order to do so, they have to, oh gosh, this is really borderline.
Borderline between call and shove, right?
Yeah, and fold. I think it's really close to all three because this is the first time it's 3x.
Okay. Okay.
So like He's been not really all that crazy, so I think there's some room to fold. I mean, I'm suited.
Okay.
Like, I would fold ace-5 off there,
Right,
but
right.
the suited version, and then, well, this we fold. Although I'm not super happy because I've got backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, but it's fine. He's
Yeah.
bluffing there, like hands that beat me, like ace-king, ace-queen.
Right,
He's
right.
also jamming a lot of pocket pairs there that raise 3x. But yeah, so what I was saying is that they're trying to sell pre-flop, but there's so many flops that essentially they, instead of using all the flops, they do a clever trick where they take a small set of flops and then use weighting to make them work like the big set. And it's really hard sort of concept to grasp. I think the closest way to think about it I've found is a little bit how the rational numbers are, very close to the real numbers. But that's, I'm a mathematician, so that's how I think about it. But anyways, it's just a way to like use fewer flops to represent the whole game. As for the number, I mean, there's no definitive answer right now that I can give you. The more the better is generally understood, but it's sort of a diminishing marginal returns and how much computing power you have. I think generally people use something between like 60 and 120, and it works fine. I should have min-raised. I usually min-raise as pre. Talking about pre-flop. So something like that is fine. But honestly, I think a lot of the GTO solutions are a little bit overemphasized by some people. Like, they're not going to make you a better player. You have to put in a whole lot of work and try and understand what they are and how they work and what to do with them. So I mean, as a newer player, I wouldn't recommend using too much of those. Oh God, I guess he's been like jamming all the time. This is really borderline.
Yeah, that was a pretty close spot. I agree.
I think he's been crazy enough. I'm just gonna hero call, but
Pretty
yeah,
good
I wish I
equity.
had. Yeah, I would
Nice.
definitely be holding other pairs, but he's been doing that open shove on the flop or like betting really big on the flop a lot. So and there's a lot of room where he does it with some thinner protection hands. So yeah, whatever is
Right.
standard, just use
Okay,
that, and
sweet.
don't worry about it too much. It's not gonna impact your solution too much.
Okay. Next, Iliev. Iliev, I don't know if you're on this particular Twitch stream, but you have some good questions, though we may not get to all of them, but let's talk about some of the ideas behind these. So first one, what do you think that expected win rate for small blind three-way, three-handed play might be?
Oh, 1 second. Let me check. I always
Yeah,
forget
yeah,
this.
sure,
Yeah,
sure.
that's a call. That's a call. And 50 chips I can skip. Expected win rate in BB per 100 for small blind three-way. I
Guess.
think generally,
Nice. Ship it.
yeah, I did. Good numbers are somewhere in the like -3 or 4 to like +1. But it's very subject to variance. You need a lot of sample. It's also subject to stakes you play at. Obviously, at lower stakes, you can have higher win rates. But you're kind of shooting for around 0, but you're fine if you're a couple negative.
Okay.
And you're very happy if you're in the positive. And you're probably running good. if you have like 2 or 3, I mean, chances are you're looking at a small sample and you're running good. But hey, maybe you're amazingly good.
That's good. That's good, man. That's a very specific answer. I like that. I think a lot of people would be sort of, they want to give a quantitative answer to that question. They would sort of hem and haw a little bit. So I like that answer a lot. Next question is, do you use cash game type strategies on small blind versus button?
Probably not. I mean, I'm not super well versed in what cash game strategies are, but cash games generally run really quite deep. Usually looking at 50 to 100 big blind stacks, whereas in spins you're looking at 25 or lower. So, so things change quite a bit. I think also the tendencies for button play are a little bit different. I think cash game players play really really loose on the button in a lot of games. I'm not quite sure why. I don't really like studying the empirical evidence in spins, like you got to play pretty tight on the button. So I'm really sometimes shocked at some of the, advice I hear even from some of the best cash game guys, like to play really light. And I think it just comes out of the deep stacks. So probably not. I mean, I think he's probably referring to like playing 3-bet fold. And for sure, I don't play 3-bet fold. I have a flatting range in the small blind, but I also have a 3-betting range. 3-bet shove some stuff, not all in 3-bet some stuff, flat some stuff.
Okay, yeah, I think that's exactly what he's asking, so that's really good. You can load the 15 at any point.
Yep.
When you say people are way too wide on the button, like, could you...
I'm not too wide, again, like really wide compared to like what I think is good in spins. Like usually in spins, something like 40% VPIP is a wide VPIP on the button.
40 on the button?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, when I see cash game players opening like 9 deuce suited or,
right.
8-7 off or, some stuff like that, it always strikes me as a little bit strange. But again, I mean, deeper stack, there's a lot more positional edge. Your opponents can't 3-bet shove you. So, I mean, it makes sense that you can play more hands. But it also strikes me as probably incorrect to be playing 70%. Just because on the button, you have to have, every hand has to be strictly profitable from start of play. Like heads up on the small blind, you get to play really loose because you've already put in a small blind. So all you need to do is get your small blind back, which means, you don't need to win more than half the pot. You just need to get that, small share back. On the button, you need to get back more money than you put in with every hand you play, on average. So it makes it a lot tougher to play a wide range of hands.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And also, not being too wide on the button. A good explanation of that. And the last question we'll get to from Ilyev pertains to playing from the small blind. Blind versus blind once the button is folded. So could you just talk a little bit about a few principles for small blind play, like maybe how often we're limping versus min raising versus shoving?
Yeah. So generally in the small blind, you're looking GTO plays about 2/3 of hands. It'll vary a little bit by stack depth, but that's a good ballpark ballpoint, whatever. It's a good average to say around 2/3 of hands. But in general, a lot of people play too tight in the big blind, both pre-flop and post-flop. So versus weaker players, you can get away with playing a lot wider. But I sort of would say that you probably don't want to play much more than 80% almost ever. So you're usually looking to play, maybe a maximum of maybe 85% of hands and a minimum of maybe 60, but that's like really tight. You need some really crazy aggressive players, but that's kind of the range of hands. And then from there, like whether you limp, whether you min raise, whether you 3x, 2.5x, the EVs tend to run really close. It's still kind of an open question. GTO generally, like 25 BBs will 3x and limp and not really not min raise at all. But versus a lot of players you play against, min raising can be very, very good. This is really borderline too. I guess we can just hero fold, but it's not the end of the world to float here. Just because we're in position.
I would have thought that 7-4 suited was the kind of hand that, I know it's a better hand to open than 9 deuce suited, but that still with
it's
that
really
effective
loose.
stack, it would have been slightly wider than you.
Yeah, I think I usually fold it, but I'm a little distracted answering the questions.
No,
I think I would.
You're doing a great job with that, by the way, because I know it's super tough when you're only playing one table, but it's all 3-handed or heads up, and some of the questions are very involved. So well done.
Okay. I've got 2 weaker players. It's not the end of the world to open that. At least it's pretty connected, so it doesn't play bad 3-handed.
Yeah, it's a pretty looking hand.
So it's like this is a hand that GTO would just open fold, but people fold too much, so we can get away with min raising. So like what you're doing with your VPIP is again a lot up for debate. A lot of different options you can use that work well. But that's about what you're looking to do. In the big blind versus min raises, you should be defending really wide. somewhere around 90% of hands, maybe at the tightest 80, 75. It gets a little bit less as you get shallower, but you're looking to defend a lot. Mostly flatting with some 3-betting, some 3-bet shoving, some 3-betting not all in. Yes. Yeah, so you can just see, just snap fold to a very small sizing. You just get a lot of this kind of tight passive play. But yeah, so versus a min raise, you want to defend pretty wide. Versus a 3x, you're going to want to defend a lot less, but still, I think GTO defends around 60% versus a 3x. If you think your opponent's pretty value heavy, you could maybe go as tight as 50, 55%. 2.5x's are in between. This is actually really close. You can both fold and flat that.
Yeah, I was going to say I would definitely fold that, but would have been interested if that was a defense for you. Let's go on to the next. Sorry, go on.
It's about a break-even defend. So like, if we're not thinking about win rate maxing, if we're in if this was a cash game, I think it is a defend. It's slightly better called than folded, but it's so slight that versus most people you could just fold it, and not worry too much.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, and we already had one earlier from Beetle in the Twitch chat, and now he has one in the thread, which I'm very glad he asked because I wanted to get to this. Beetle wants to know, he says, I'm interested in a staking program at a spin stable. Could you describe SpinLegends and what their advantages are against competitors and why a poker player should choose the stable?
So, I mean, the English team is just starting up, so, we haven't officially gotten started yet, so I haven't been working with them too long. But I can tell you that, we have some of the best people working on strategies. Alvaro has the best results of any regular, I think, over some, crazy samples and crazy multi-tabling. I mean, you can read about his challenge. I mean, it's just beyond belief. I really didn't think that was possible. I don't side bet, but if I was a side betting person, I would have absolutely bet against him. Lost money, so glad I don't side bet. But and I've been working on heads up, sit and go, and spin strategy for years and years. So we have a whole set of pre-flop charts, post-flop strategies. I've been working hard on building videos to guide you through all the different situations you're going to be in. And we're going to just have a tremendous amount of coaching accessible to you. Between attending group sessions, watching videos of group sessions that you can't make. If you can't make a session because of other obligations, you can just watch it afterwards. So I think that's going to be, a really, really big competitive advantage where just the quality of instruction, I think, is going to be beyond any other stable by far. And we're going to make sure of that between Alvaro and me and the rest of the team. It's going to be our number one goal is to make sure that the material the SpinLegends group has is the best.
Sweet. And the gold and diamond level players in the stable, so everyone but the initial bronze level players, actually get to work directly with you and Alvaro to some extent. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. There's also a lot of software you get access to. You get access to tracking software, Stars Helper, which I'm using. We have our own HUD. So you get access to the SpinLegends HUD, which is really advanced. And that's why I'm playing without a HUD, is that I didn't want to share on a live Twitch, exactly which stats we have because we don't want it copied. It's a really, really amazing HUD. So beyond that, there's also sort of the software, the support side, and just being part of a community of players all working towards, becoming the best.
Right, and I guess there are different group chats where the players can talk with each other, with other spin players, talk with you guys, get support.
Yeah. And
with the HUD, it's pretty nasty. I know you don't want to reveal too much about it, but can you talk a little bit, is it, for example, the HUD named after you, your HUD, the coffeeyay HUD, yeah. Is it kind of like an advanced version of that? Yeah,
it's fairly similar to the Coffee Spins HUD, but quite a bit more advanced, just more stats and better different selection of sats. Some just like more advanced ones, different kinds. So yeah, it's a little bit like that, but yeah, more advanced.
Okay, great. And just go ahead and for those of you guys who want to see a little more of that visually, here is the link. So you see here pokerstrategy.com/spinlessons, and it'll go on and show you more about what you can get, more about Adam, aka coffeeyay, more about Alvaro, and the benefits of the different levels. So check that out here at pokerstrategy.com/spinlessons.
SpinLegends.
Sorry, Spin Legends. And we're now on to the 30s, so moving on
Yeah.
up.
So I think this might be a regular, although I don't know. I don't play these stakes, but sort of a lot of Polish players are regulars. I would usually barrel here, but I think because I think he might be an aggressive regular, I'm going to try to check to induce. But given that he checks back, I guess he probably has a low pair. I should just value bet here. I don't think he's folding a 6 or a 3.
Z's out wants to know.
There's a pair of 6s.
Oh,
Oui.
wants to know. I guess this is a little bit similar to an earlier question, but if there's sort of a basic spin strategy that people can learn and build on.
I mean, playing good poker, I don't like. Yes, I mean every game has basic strategy that you learn and improve on. I don't know how to answer that in more detail. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So I guess these out there are videos and content on poker strategy that contain information, for example, about pre-flop ranges. So maybe the basic strategy would be to learn more about pre-flop ranges, get sort of decent default ranges, and then build up from there. Post-flop is going to be trickier, I think at least. There's more to it, but you can still learn some basic concepts and see, for example, how often you're c-betting and other stuff to leak find.
Yeah, I mean the thing is that the game of poker is like larger than the universe. I think is the numbers. Like there are more possible decision points than like atoms in the universe or something like that. Someone calculated. So I mean, it's really hard to start talking about really specific details. Like you can't have a plan for every single situation. Oh gosh, I hate this spot. I'll just fold. If I had a backdoor flush draw, I'd continue, but it's fine. But you can have like guidelines and rules and a way to understand how different hands fit in your range and how you build your ranges in different situations, like an understanding of what a value hand is, what a bluffing hand is, what strength value hands should you use. Like all of that is stuff that you can learn and you can learn to apply at the tables. So you can sort of build up a general methodology and approach to the game that lets you navigate a lot of different situations as they come up. And that's sort of post-flop. I mean, even pre-flop, like you can use charts, but in reality, like you want to adjust to the players. Once you start getting reads, you want to play differently against players who do certain things. So you always want to be, trying to figure out what's the best choice. And to do that, you really have to put in a lot of work studying, again, the general concepts, the methodology, and trying to figure out like why are certain options better than others? What am I trying to accomplish? What's his range? How am I trying? What's his folding range? What's his calling range? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I could min-raise bluff here, but it's really close. Just fold it.
All right. Now we have a number of questions from. If you missed the point where we went through your questions in the thread. You came in just a little bit late for that, but I guess you'll be able to check this out on replay. I'll just take one of the questions that you're asking now and pose it to Adam, which is, hands do you use for non-all-in squeezes?
That's a really weird spot. I don't do all that much not all in squeezing. I mean, there's some obvious hands like you should be not all in squeezing big pocket pairs. Basically always. At least pocket queens to aces. Probably you can go lighter. And then from there, like depending on the situation, you might be able to squeeze some thinner value. Maybe some big suited aces, maybe like some king queen type stuff. And maybe you want to bluff. If you think that your table is capable of giving your non all-in squeeze a lot of credit, you might want to throw in some bluffs. At which point, hands that can make sense are maybe hands from the top of your folding range. If you expect your opponents to mostly fold or 4-bet, then hands from the top of your folding range are really good. And maybe some, slightly more playable hands from the, bottom, or maybe not absolute bottom, but near the bottom of your calling range can make some sense to bluff with. But generally you want to build your range from value and then maybe add bluffs. And so, I mean, the value hands that make a ton of sense are big pocket pairs. And then, from there might be some other stuff you want to put in.
Yeah, the high pocket pairs definitely for squeezes. Next question is from Dagalaz. I guess we kind of covered that, though, calculating strategies for spins and coming up with basic strategies. So let's move on to Vikas, who has a few questions. One of them is if you have any thoughts about the mental game when playing spins.
Yeah, I mean, I think spins are tough. The variance is pretty intense. Especially in terms of real money, but even in like your EV line, if you're tracking your chip EV, there could be a ton of variance. So it can be very tough mentally to sort of stay motivated and stay grinding. I think that those are some of the biggest challenges that I think I've seen people face, is just staying motivated to keep putting in volume. That being said, I mean, I think, the variance is pretty high compared to maybe heads up sit and goes, but certainly is much lower than playing MTTs. And, there's lots of professionals that get by playing MTTs and have for a long time and survive just fine. So, it's not the end of the world variance or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think the mental game can be a very important aspect. I do think that some people overemphasize mental game, and that generally as a beginning player, your goal should be learning strong strategies, and strong strategic thinking will improve your mental game anyways. If you know better what mistakes are, you're less likely to make them, even if you have mental game issues. So I generally think step one is to learn how to play really good poker. And if you're still having issues executing, and you know what the best option is, but you're not executing at the table, then you should start thinking about mental game, in my opinion. But again, I mean, it's a little bit of an open question. I think that there's a lot of people with different opinions on mental game, and it's a tough one. I mean, it varies so much by person, which I think is why you get so many different opinions. Some mental game stuff works on some people and not on others, and some people, like everyone has different versions of mental game problems. So what I will say is that you have to overcome it. Like, you have to put in volume, you have to stay motivated to play, because that's what that's the whole point of playing poker. That's how you play poker, is by playing it. You can't be a successful poker player if you're not playing poker. But from there, I think step one is focus as much as you can on learning what you should be doing. Understanding your decisions. Trying to figure out everything you can about poker strategy and poker thinking. And then from there, if you're still not getting the success you're looking for, and you think you have issues with your mental game, then you can start exploring. There's a lot of different options. There's a lot of books and content, etc., that you can explore to try to improve that aspect.
Okay, great. And that's a good point. People focus on how much variance there is in spins, but you make a nice comparison to MTTs, which particularly large field MTTs can be wildly swingy games. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Let's see. Small river value bet. Nice.
Opponent's range is so weak when they bet two and then check that river. It's so towards pairs of nines. There's really not a lot of better tens even. So, I mean, I don't have a great kicker, but I think if I'm getting called by all the nines, I can value bet there.
Sure, sure.
And I
And
don't expect to get raised very much.
Vikas, I'll give just one apart from your question, which is, could you talk? You obviously have a background in math about using math in poker and how important math is to a poker player.
You know, math is something I think a lot of people don't think correctly about. Like, I think the first instinct for a lot of people when they hear math is to think about like numbers and computing stuff, which is certainly part of it. But a lot of mathematical thinking is just thinking in a rigorous, provable manner. Trying to think about things in a way that always makes sense, in a way that's sort of verifiable. And in that sense, I think math is very important. In some sense, like the feel in poker is getting a feel for your opponent, how they're playing, how they construct their ranges. But then to know what's really correct, you have to do some level of math. You have to understand some basic concepts of EV and how to get value and things like that. And there's a lot of people who are able to do that subconsciously. I should have barreled, but that's okay. And I think a lot of players, are good at poker math without sort of knowing that they're good at math. But I mean, at some point, like math is what provides sort of precision to our play. I don't like my line here. I should have barreled the turn. And as played, I was like, oh, I should have bluffed the turn, so I should now bluff river. But
Well, like I said, it's not easy doing what you're doing right now, fielding a million questions and playing heads up. So you get a pass, a free one-time pass.
I did time out. I was trying to bet. And I guess given that they just made a really light call and I bluffed, I can't bluff here. Yeah, I think it's probably calling me. So yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of how I think about it. Like, feel is sort of what lets you understand your opponent and get a sense of ranges, but math is sort of what lets you make precise decisions and know what's truly best and to weigh the pros and cons. And try to be able to figure that kind of stuff out. So yeah, you don't need to be a math genius. You don't need to have a background in mathematics or anything like that. But you need to sort of understand that you need to approach it from a point of view that there exist best decisions, and you want to know things for sure, and you want to be able to prove things and prove it to yourself or to others why you think a certain line is best. And so, using logical thinking and that kind of thing is really important. And sometimes you do have to do some, EV math and, count, your putt odds or whatever. And so sometimes you have to compute some numbers. But for the most part, it's just, thinking logically. And that's sort of what I think about as the poker math.
Yeah, that's a huge part of math, of course. And going through proofs and stuff and one step to the next. So definitely a nice answer there. I'll quickly take one more from the chat, which is, if you're coaching a student, what do you teach them at the beginning? Or let's say, for example, you have someone who joins SpinLegends and you're, a more earlier player. Do you teach them like more ranges and bet sizes, or how does it start off?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what you sort of said, starting out with pre-flop is always a good place. I mean, it's really tough because everyone comes in to the game with different backgrounds, different knowledge of poker. It's very rare. I mean, I don't know if I've ever taught a player, completely from nothing. This is Texas Hold'em. You start out with 2 cold cards. Like, they always know some of the rules. So I always try to, identify what level they're at and, see what their kind of common mistakes are. And generally, the best approach is to start with the things that are the easiest to fix, maybe in combination with like the most valuable to fix, trying to kind of balance that out. What's the most valuable to fix and pretty easy. And, you keep hammering through things one by one. And so, yeah, it usually ends up being a good amount of, just range-based thinking. Again, like kind of understanding how we build our range and, what's important in different situations. Why we would want to bluff 10-6 suited in that spot with hearts rather than 7 deuce off with nothing. basic sort of ideas of, what's a value hand, and how thin can you value bet in different places. But yeah, in SpinLegends, it's going to be really nice because you'll have a video series that you'll be able to watch at the beginning to guide you through all this kind of stuff. So you'll already have the sort of basic strategy, and then it'll be about filling in the blanks from there. And yeah, hope that's a good
That's
enough
a very good
answer.
answer.
Pretty broad question. So
It is a broad question. Yeah, I feel like we're timing this pretty good. You're gonna hit the hundreds before we end, which should be perfect. I think we're gonna get to all the thread questions, so this is going
yeah.
pretty good. Let me go to the next one. As picked her, I think your question we've kind of covered. So Olympiolf wants to know, what are the main advantages of playing spin and goes compared to cash games?
Hourly. I mean, they're generally just more profitable. I mean, that's like the easy answer.
And because they're softer formats, more recreational players have moved into spins, and the cash games are regular.
That's one aspect, but generally shorter stacked formats have better hourlies because your BB per 100 edge isn't that much lower, but each BB is worth more money. So like I'm playing a $60 spin and go, and I start out with 500 chips. That means each chip is worth 60 divided by 500, a little bit less than 10 cents. If I had bought in for $60 at a cash game, I'd get 60 big blinds, and so each big blind would be worth a lot less money, right? No, sorry, this is how many chips, right? I have 60 cents as a chip. So in terms of big blinds, like if I multiply by 20, each big blind is potentially worth a lot of money. I think I did that math wrong. But my point is that like each big blind is worth a lot of money when you're playing short stacked and buying in for pretty large amounts. And so a small BB per 100 edge can translate into a very large amount of money per hour. And so that's generally one of the big advantages to short stack formats over deeper stack formats, is that you're sort of effectively playing at almost higher stakes. You can think about it. Your edge is converted into more dollars per hour. So I think it's a combination of, it's the fields are really good, and the hourly is good because you're playing quick games that you can play a lot of games, and you're playing at pretty short stacks where even small BB per 100 edges convert into a lot of dollars per hour edges.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That guy was not a believer in the hand where you had 8-5 suited. He was not buying it.
Oh yeah, he called me with the bear sevens.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess, he would have felt pretty good if that was
Yeah.
the best hand, so there is that.
Yep.
Bartix has a question. He wants to know what ROI he might make playing $15 spins.
I think generally achievable ROIs for 15s I think are somewhere in the like 5 to 8% range. I think that's sort of what you're aiming for. I think, generally if you're getting above 3, you should be pretty happy, but you can certainly get it up to 5 without too much trouble at the 15s.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if you have 8%, and there could definitely be players who are doing that or doing even higher, but given the number of chips you start off with and the rake, that would seem to me like you're really crushing the game with an 8% ROI.
Yeah. And probably you have a combination of you're running good in terms of card distribution or whatever, and and probably you should move up, right? I mean, there's not going to be a lot of 8% winners at 15s, because if you're crushing the game at 8%, you should probably move up to the next stake as soon as possible. But in some cases, the bankroll or whatever, it might make sense. But yeah, or again, potentially add tables. Although I generally prefer moving up or adding more tables. I think it's usually better. But
sorry to interrupt you. What just happened in that hand? Did he raised like
half his stack.
12x?
Yeah, he raised like 12x, or about half his stack.
And this guy's a reg, right? Is that a reg?
No. I have him marked as a crazy player.
Oh, okay. I'm used to yellow being reg. I was going to say, it just seems like a kind of wild play for a reg to make, so that makes a little more sense.
Yeah. Oh, let me get cooler. That's life. Oh well.
Oh well.
All right.
Now moving up to hundreds, we have a question from Y Piranha on this topic. He wants to know if someone crushing hundreds move down to lower stakes, like let's say a $30 spins, do you have an estimate for what ROI they might beat those games at?
Again, like probably something like 5 to 9%.
Right, okay. So it's not like so much that, at 15s you have one cap and then at 30s you have another. Just kind of as you move up, the games get a little bit tougher, but you have kind of similar caps for if you're crushing it, you get one ROI, etc.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, as you get higher, the achievable ROIs get lower because you're playing against more regs, and that's just part of life.
Could you
Um,
move? Sorry, could you move that table a
oh,
little
yeah.
more to the right?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect. That is great.
Um, so yeah, I mean, if they're, I mean, 30s aren't that much softer than hundreds, so I don't think they'd be able to get like 9% or something. But I think if someone is, a 5% winner at the hundreds, or even like 3.5, they'd probably be getting around 9% at the 15s, I assume. Um,
Is is that entirely standard that pocket threes jam? What do you think about limping there with the plan of if he checks, you play a small pot out of position, and if he raises, you put in the limp shove?
It's okay. If we're in position, I wouldn't be shoving it, and limp shoving or min raising or even limp flatting are all really good options. But because we're playing out of position, there's so much value in folding out shares of his range, 25 BBs, that pocket twos, pocket threes, pocket fours all should be open shoved. This is kind of loose open. That's fine. So, yeah,
Okay.
I don't really think there's a better way of
Okay.
playing it. Again, if we're heads up and we got to play in position on post flop, then open shoving is still fine, but probably other options are a little bit better, especially combined with win rate maxing. But when you're in small blind versus big blind, you just have to take your folds. Oh, this is not fun. I've got the king of spades, so it's not the end of the world, and I can fold later streets. Okay, you win. Nice hand.
Wait till you play this hand, and then we'll get to the next question.
Quite like min betting. This is weaker players to induce wider floats and raises. I guess we should probably just barrel here. I don't think there's a lot of room to induce a call, a bet when check two. Huh. Well, that's weird. These are generally really strong, so I'm not happy here. But I'm not going to fold. I have a gut shot with it too. And that's not a great card, but not terrible. Oh, this is really bad. Yes.
Nice.
Check back. I guess
So
I
he had
induced
a king of
king nine.
spades. Huh.
So he bluffed the turn with king high.
Right,
Very
right.
weird.
Yeah.
Very strange. But I guess
That
he
was a
checked
tough
back.
spot. I think you handled that pretty well. I think that's a spot where you don't really have very many great options.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so let's go on. Now we get to kind of an unusual part in the thread. It's kind of tangential, but I guess I'll at least ask you the, the first question in this up and back. KTU wants you to know if you could prove in 2 hours without looking up the proof e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0.
Probably.
Okay, probably. I'll take it.
I mean, my complex analysis is a little bit rusty, but I think that shouldn't be a problem.
I
I
don't know
feel like,
about you. I also took quite a bit of math. I feel like there are a lot of things in math that, like, I couldn't just do, but that if I had a book or whatever I was looking at for some amount of time, like, I kind of feel like it would come back to me pretty quick. But
yeah, I feel
that it
like
would be
this is
tough to just
like
rattle
something like
out.
that. I think I remember enough of the like the conversions to be able to just with like a paper and pencil write it out and mess around with it and try to prove it. I think I would probably try to convert it into sines and cosines and see if I can get it to equal 1 using a trigonometric identity. And I think I remember enough trig identities where I could do it, but yeah, so I think so.
Okay,
But
good answer. Good answer. For anyone interested, Tony P. Mem gives his proof in the thread. So, Tony, well done with that. Let me go to a question.
does he convert it into sine? Does he use the Euler's formula to convert it to sine plus cosine?
Let me see. He gives it as a spoiler. I'm clicking on a spoiler now. Yes, yes, it seems to
Yes.
be very sine and
Get it.
cosine heavy. So, well done, man. Well done. Um, you never know when something like that will come up in spins, right?
Yeah.
It could be like one of those bot tests where you're playing 20 tables and then stars chat. It just shows up like prove e to the I pi plus 1 is 0. You know, you've got 90 seconds.
I heard a story about a mathematician that when they were flying, the TSA asked him because he was flying with all these like math books and like they had read about some people like trying to, I don't know, smuggle things in books, and so they asked him like, "What's the definition of a group?" And he defined it, and they're like, "Okay, great." That's like verify that he was really a mathematician. So
That's what
yeah,
I'm kind of surprised that like random flight attendants would sort of know what a group is in a mathematical
I guess as a
sense.
TSA person.
Oh, TSA, right. Okay. Well, even TSA, I would think that a
Yeah,
group, they would define a group as sort of like a bunch of people.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it was maybe a pre-written test or something.
Right, right.
Got it from above.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue on here. Then we have a number of posts from Tony with more on this topic, including including a video.
Oh god, this
So
is
here you go.
insanely awkward. I gotta try to limp here, although everything's kind of close.
I
But with
assume
limping, I can still fold to his shove, so it's okay. I mean, it's still not a great fold because of putt odds, but
I would have
there's a
thought
good
we
amount
had
of
the
win rate.
equity to call that off when big blind shoves.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of win rate maxing, so
Oh, okay.
tip EV doesn't convert exactly into win rate. And so effectively, I need more equity than just pot odds to call it off there. And also, people generally don't like bluff shove ever, and they tend to even over a limp, they tend to shove pretty strong ranges. So it's yeah. I mean, like there are a lot of options in that spot. I could have open shoved. I could have min raised called. If I had min raised, I absolutely would have called the big blind. But I thought that would be good. And this is actually also kind of close, but a call. Oh, wee. Uh-oh. Oh.
Okay, but ace king, we can work with that.
Work with that. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
My chip's back. Guess I limped last time.
Yeah, we folded.
Min raising's also fine here. But yeah, maybe he'll be a little bit more likely. And this board actually hits the check back range pretty hard. There's a lot of gut shots and pairs of sevens that connect, so I'm not going to slow play. Okay, this one's easy. Yeah, so what was the series of questions and videos? They're all math ones?
Yeah, they're all...
This is also...
See, he's
This is
probably
for
pretty
stuff.
capped, right? When he jams
Yeah.
that deep effective with you.
Yeah, there's still a lot of ace-x and pocket pairs, though. It's really borderline. Like, if I was playing with a HUD, I could check, like, the Nash numbers and maybe like, have a better sense of what his VPIP is and maybe make a better decision. But
Yeah,
as is, I can make the game go a little longer.
right. Anyway, yeah, but I think, unfortunately, I mean, it's got to be a little bit outside of what people are here for. So I think we're going to pass on the rest of that, but you guys can check out the thread if you're very interested in that proof and getting some information about that. Let's go now to a question from my man Honigman38. Okay, play the eights. I guess that was just a walk in the big blind.
Yeah.
Honeyman rates. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's do this. Why don't we finish? You play out the spin. Oh, come on. Combo draw. Too many outs. It's a $100 spin at higher blind, so let's just play this out, and then I'll continue pestering you with questions for the last 10 minutes or so.
All right, that sounds good. We should be over pretty soon. Although the three-handed push-fold stages sometimes go quite long. Come on. Oh, this guy does not lose.
Ace.
Nope.
Boo.
All right. Jack 5 suited.
Okay, pretty good equity.
Uh-oh. Ooh.
Yay.
Still in it to win it.
On that hand, by the way, the 10 for offsuit, you're going with about top 50?
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's probably about right. Again, you need every hand to be profitable when called, and the big blind's always going to call you. So you basically need to have hands that have more than 50% equity versus any two cards. So you can't just jam 10-4 off and expect, oh, I'm so shallow, I'm going to jam 10-4 off. Like, you're just burning money.
Right,
There's no way you're, ahead of the big blind's range. Even if they call you with any two cards, you're behind. And there's no pot odds. Like, I haven't invested any money. This is also a fold.
That's going to be pretty close, too. The Queen 8 off.
Yeah, I think Queen 9's a jam, and Queen 8's like a jam, like 1 or 2 BBs or something.
Okay.
Yeah, nice thing about the SpinLegends HUD is it has a little pop-up to show you Nash push-fold ranges. So
Oh, nice.
A little bit reliant on that. Oh. We might chop or something now.
Okay.
GG.
Well, still a pretty nice run-up through the ranks there.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Honeyman wants to know... In fact, I'll just go ahead now and put this inside of the viewing window for a moment. So here's Honeyman's question. What is your general 3-bet strategy at, say, 30 big blinds? He says it's fairly easy to come up with a reasonable value range at those stack depths, but he struggles a bit at finding good bluffing hands. And is it even necessary to have a balanced range in those spots, or can you just 3-bet a very value-heavy range in general?
So, yeah, that's a really good question. So first off, do you need to be balanced? No. Balance is not something you ever want to aim for directly. You want to play every hand as profitably as possible. If you think that bluffing is worse than your other options, either folding or calling, then you should not bluff. It's pretty much that simple. That being said, given certain situations, you can, think that bluffing is very likely profitable and likely should be part of your strategy. And then I think it's a very valid question, like what are the best bluffing hands? So generally when you're shoving, the most important thing is your equity when called. A little bit like equity when called, a little bit also like how well it does with other options, like how well it flats. But the primary thing is how much equity you have when called. That generally distinguishes what are good bluffs from bad bluffs. You look at the weak hands and pick out, hands that you think are bluffs, not value shoves, and you pick out what's a good equity when called. So you can start thinking about the kind of range you get called by when you shove 30 BBs deep. Start using, a calculator like Equilab and put them on, let's say ace 10 plus and pocket 3s plus, and look at, equities of different hands versus that. Which hands have good, better equity than other hands? That tells you what are better bluffs. When you're looking to non-all-in 3-bet, things get a little bit dicier. You need to think a little bit, and you really want to think about how is your opponent responding to your non-all-in 3-bets. Do you expect them to call a lot, or do you expect them to fold and 4-bet a lot, or some combination? The more they fold and 4-bet, the worse your non-all-in bluffing hands should be, because you're not seeing a flop. You don't care how playable your hand is if your opponent's always either folding or 4-betting you. And they could 4-bet a decent amount but still fold a lot, and you still want to bluff. And so in those situations, you generally want to take hands from the top of your folding range. There's still no reason to take like 7 deuce off or a hand, completely bad, because you're probably not planning on playing 100% of hands versus their open. So you have a folding range. Your folding range should have the worst hands possible in it. So you'd be taking hands from the top of your folding range, or very possibly from the bottom of your calling range, or hands that you think are really close between calling and folding. The more your opponent calls, the more playable your range should be, and the more you want to take hands that can flop something. You still might need to be cautious about 4-betting. There's still a lot of room where you want to be cautious 3-bet folding very playable hands that sort of have to fold a lot of equity to their shoves. But the deeper you are, the more you can get away with it, and the more you can flat their 4-bets.
Right.
But that's when you're starting to think a little bit more about more playable bluffs. And there's a wide variety of hands that bluff well. If you look at GTO solutions, they bluff all sorts of hands. But they tend to kind of follow a little bit that rule where, depending on the stack depth, if their opponent starts playing a little bit too many 4-bets, they start taking out playable hands as they get shallower, because they don't want to 3-bet fold playable hands. But if you look at very deep stacked solutions, they 3-bet very playable ranges. So just ask yourself, how do I expect my opponent to defend when he does defend my 3-bet? I can think he folds too much, and I want to bluff, but how does he defend when he doesn't fold? Does he mostly call or 4-bet? And that tells you about what kind of bluffing hands you want to use.
Yeah, sure. So that's a very good thing to think about, right? Is think about how are they going to respond to your 3-bet, and how do you want to construct your range. Let's go to just one more question, a strategy-related question, which is there are a few people talking about when to move up and sample sizes. I know it's not totally a black and white thing, but do you have any general guidelines for how many games you would want to have good results for before deciding to move up?
It's really hard, and especially in spins, you generally want pretty big samples until you can, quantify your win rate pretty well. So a lot of the times, the problem even becomes by the time you've, played 10,000 games, you're probably playing a lot better than you were before. So, I would say, to be somewhat confident about your win rate, you probably want around 5,000 games. But, if you've got a good bankroll, you're confident in your game, you know that you understand what you're doing, you understand your opponents, you've got really good results, you can move up earlier and just hope for the best. Again, the harder you're crushing over a small sample, the more likely you're really winning too. So, moving up after 2,000 games where you had a 1.5% EVRY, that's probably not a great idea. Moving up after 2,000 games with because you had an 8% EVRY, and you've got a decent bankroll, yeah, sure, do it. So it definitely comes down to a little bit of personal decision making, and a little bit your tolerance for risk and how much you cash out. The more you cash out, the more conservative you should be with your bankroll management. Again, your willingness to move down. So there's really no great great answer. In my video pack, I ran some numbers and sort of showed some different bankroll strategies. But yeah, I didn't really tackle how much sample you need. But yeah, I would say that generally you want before you're pretty confident about your win rate, you probably want 5,000 to 10,000 games. So yeah, oftentimes you're just going to have to move up or down a little bit in the dark because you're probably not going to have all that much sample. But yeah, preferably something like over 5,000 games before you can be somewhat okay with knowing you're winning for sure. And if you're moving up with less, well, you can just have faith in yourself and hope for the best.
Yeah, okay. So probably minimum 5,000 games, but like you said, it's not like you have to go to one stake and sign your name in blood. I'm only going to play this stake forever. You can see how things go, and that's a good approach. So that's pretty much.
So I was just going to say that's one of the things I found is, I think one of the bigger benefits sometimes to players who join staking programs is that's one thing they don't have to deal with for better. Generally for better. You don't have to deal with move up, move down decisions. You have someone who has a ton of experience and data, etc., knowing when to move you up and down. And and obviously bankrolling you. So it doesn't matter what your dollar results were at any stake. It only matters what your EV was, and they can control that. And I know that that's been, a really big factor to a lot of players, where taking that decision out of their hands really, really benefited them. Just opened them, let them focus on what they're good at, playing poker and, crushing the games, and not worry about when is exactly the best time to move up. You can just put that into the hands of the professionals.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a big benefit of it. So this is pretty much the hour and a half, but let's just, if you don't mind,
Sure.
talk for one last minute about Spin Legends and kind of sum that up. Is it? We have a question from someone. Is it a specific results necessary to apply? For example, are you guys looking for a certain minimum sample, minimum results? Or is it just
I'm
sort of
not.
apply and then, they'll
I'm
get
not
back to you and
interested
talk
in
with you?
that. So it's always like a little bit of a tough question because like I focus on the coaching and strategy aspect. So I'm really not the person to go to in terms of like what contract am I going to get? What are the results I need or whatever. Your best bet is just to apply. I'm From what I know, I think that we're not looking for too much, and in the end, your best bet is just apply. And if they say no, they'll tell you why. And then you can, achieve whatever is needed. But honestly, it's just not something I know off the top of my head, and it's not something that's my specialty.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
the organization's part, and just the best bet is just apply. What's the worst that can happen, right? I
Right.
mean, if they say no, you didn't lose anything. There's no application fee. You're not paying anything to apply. It takes a few minutes of your time. Send the information that they request, and again, leave it to the experts, and they'll get back to you with with what you whether you're qualified or not. But I think we're staking, even down to like the $1 games. So I'm pretty sure that you don't really need almost any experience. But don't quote me on that because I'm not. Again, that's not my field for
Yeah,
SpinLegends.
yeah. So just go ahead and apply, and you'll find out. I'll tell you, man, I've been staking for a while, and I really should have thought of that application fee you were talking about. That would have been pretty sweet. It's like 29.99 to apply.
Yeah,
um,
it does
so,
take a lot of time to read through applications, so I can understand that.
so for other people asking questions, specific questions about how the program works in detail, I guess you're going to have to apply to find the information out. Or if more information is available, I'll let you guys know during my next session next week. So once again, I have this up.
Sure, Alvaro will. I think Alvaro's coming on next week, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's
Yeah.
next week.
So
So
I
maybe he can elaborate more on that.
he's the one who founded, it was originally Spanish language. So I've sort of come on to help with the English language and be the head coach of the English section. I think he's going to be a lot more knowledgeable on some of those things.
Okay,
So I
great.
would say, ask him a little bit more about that. And otherwise, you can check out the website, apply, email questions, etc. is your best bet.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So once again, I'll just end this by saying I've got the URL up,
Mhm.
pokerstrategy.com/spin listens, and you've got this join now, so you can click on this and you'll apply. It's a pretty user-friendly application form, so go ahead and do that and find out more information that way. So we will end it now, and Adam, thanks so much for coming on. This has been so much fun getting to watch you play and hear your thoughts on spins, poker, and everything else.
Yeah, I'm glad you had me on. It's been really fun. And a
Sweet.
lot of great questions. I think you guys did a really good job with the questions, especially the E to the I pi
Right.
plus one.
The most important question of all.
Yes,
Um,
good stuff.
yeah, definitely. So we will end it here, and next week I believe I've got to confirm, but have Alvaro on to get uh, even another perspective on spins
Mhm.
and the stable. So thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. Great to see you guys, and next week we will be back on live at the same time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.